Um, Hi everyone. Welcome to another meeting of Integration Sync. Let me quickly start what changes went in with the palette feeds on the runtime side. Not much comparatively from the yesterday's meeting as well. All the changes that we have done have gone in uh, before the last meeting itself. So most of the changes will be coming from Serge because he's working on integrating the parrot feeds and on the relayer side. So yeah, that's my update so far. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, Vet, if you can just, if I heard you right, so does that mean that we're ready to go on the feeds validation side? All that code has been merged. We're just waiting to deploy it into the test network right now, which is just pending having the infrastructure support
Yep.
on the relayer side. Great, great. Okay, and then for
Yeah.
and we're planning to just go with the last block to start the validation of basically the last whatever the last consensus log is at the point whenever we turn it on.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
So we will pick up the last block that contains authorities. We'll start from that point, and then if we need to backfill, we can always backfill them with some changes to the runtime. That would most likely be a forkless upgrade as well. But we'll start with the latest so that we are always live. So we are always pushing the blocks live.
Okay, and we're going to be doing that for both Polkadot and Kusama whenever we deploy this simultaneously.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Any other questions for Vet? Okay. All right, Serge, if you want to go next.
Sure. So regarding updating of Relayer, yeah, so as I mentioned on Monday, I was mostly working on integration of create and put calls, because those are two calls that Relayer depends on. And actually, let me share my, I will show you my branch in GitHub. Okay, I assume you can see my screen. So since our last meeting, yeah, mostly I was working on decoding finality proofs. I made few different attempts, and currently we just, because finality proof is a struct that has block header, block hash, justification, and unknown headers. And we are only interested in justification in this case. So what I decided to do, we just slice unnecessary bytes, specifically block hash, because we know it's like fixed length, and submit justification. Currently it works, but not for all blocks, which is I'm a bit confused about this, because big portion of the blocks have same justification, but block decoding fails specifically on justification. So yeah, I still need to investigate a little bit on this. Yeah, I also did some refactoring because due to changes on the pilot feeds, there were some changes on parameters, and I had to update tests as well. And yeah, we also no longer provide metadata as a separate parameter for put call. And this is something I wanted to discuss. So for blocks, it's pretty straightforward, because for metadata for blocks is block number and block hash, and this can be extracted from the block itself, because we submit a block. But what about like a generic feed? Should are we not providing metadata for generic feeds anymore? Because I think I missed on this.
Yeah, I don't think we need that. And if someone needs, it should ideally be fairly straightforward for them to create like a custom feed processor in the future.
Okay.
And they will be able to add whatever they want.
Okay.
Just keeps our API simpler.
Yeah. Okay.
On that note, actually, is there any documentation we have right now on the feeds processor on that palette, which kind of would allow a third-party developer or like a new developer on our team to understand that process without having to read the code of how the feeds work and the data validation, like what you just said, Nazar?
We have that Notion document which describes the idea.
Okay.
Do we have anything in the code?
Is there something maybe that should we like try to distill that and put it into the README of the palette perhaps, or in the documentation of the palette somewhere?
The palette itself is documented, but not when it comes to adding a new feed processor, because we we assume that the what Nazar said, the tech spec that we built for the feed processor contains all the details to add a new one. But we can always add more documentations on and example implementations of feed processor if we want if you want to have more visibility there, Jeremiah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have README in the palette feeds, and it doesn't really say, it just says palette for interacting with subspace storage. So maybe we can like describe that the feeds are these things. They are processed by the processor, which is this thing. You can implement the custom one this way. That kind of story.
Yeah, I think that
Not explaining
would,
the implementation, but like why we have it and what it is.
yeah, the notion that notion that we have is kind of more like a design discussion document rather than like a formal spec. And the goal is like to use Notion to kind of ideate and just iterate, and then before we write the code, and then we can use that as a guide, like for an implementation plan, I guess, to write the code. But then the code should still have some documentation, which kind of extracts out like what the final product was or what the architecture was, that should stick in GitHub. If we do retain specs in Notion, then there are things like the consensus spec, which is like a formal specification, which is in Notion, and even that eventually should be like in GitHub as well, because that like consensus spec should probably tie to some like version of the protocol, but we're not at that stage yet. So I guess the long-term roadmap would be to make as much of the documentation and specs as possible like live in a version controlled repository that can match to the repo. That's the more scalable approach to this. Okay, is that clear, Ved?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Okay, does that answer your question, Serge?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, also there was an update with create call. So we no longer provide authorities as a part of initialization data parameter. This is also extracted on the palette side by in the palette feeds from the header, and yeah, that's basically all updates in the code so far. So currently, I still have this problem with put call, as I mentioned, and I'm currently working on that. After that, I will focus on implementing more tests and also I need to add fetching proofs for archived blocks, because current workflow only supports for the block we fetch over RPC endpoint. So probably we will need to update archives for Polkadot and Kusama, because currently they're stored as binaries in RocksDB. So I thought we should, before we put them into the RocksDB, we should fetch proofs, add justification, just as we do now, and store them as binary after we add justification. And then after, when we start relayer in archive mode, we already receive block with justification. Hope that's clear. Yeah, this is my update on relayer.
Okay, and when you talk about updating the archive, Serge, you only mean for past whatever checkpoint that we start with, not from Genesis to fetch all of these finality proofs?
Mm. This is something, yeah, I need to think about. Probably from Genesis.
Well, I think from Genesis, like that will allow us in the future to like restart the archiving process from Genesis, but that's like a longer term goal. Like right now, the goal is just to be able to support, like if we need to restart the archiver from like the point in history that we've actually started validating the feed. So I think it will take like weeks, honestly, to rebuild all of the archives for all the parachains like in this correct way and debug it. And I really wouldn't want that to block like just trying to make like get this live. So I think that could be like a background thing that we could start doing for like the next iteration. But if we just start, if we only update the archives like starting, like basically at the point where the checkpoint that we choose, like when we deploy this, then that's basically just updating the script. And then whenever we update the archives, it should just happen for like the new blocks that come in, right? Versus having to go back and like rebuild the archives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then we can just leave archives as is and just fetch finality proofs on demand, same as we do for blocks that we fetch from RPC.
Well, we can, I mean, we can do that like the first time we turn it on, but then if we have to like restart it a day later or a week later, then we'll have to sync all of those over the network, which will be like a bottleneck in the sync process. So can't we just like refresh the update script so that whenever the archives, like, don't we have like some process that we go back like every week and we just like incrementally like extend the archives based on what's happened since the last time it was extended, and we can just make that extension script to pull these finality proofs so that we have them at least past the point that we start doing feeds validation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this. It seems to me that it's worth recreating archives, add some kind of version into it, and pull those all of those justifications, even if you don't use them, so that like at least the data is there if someone wants to use it. Like there is one thing which we are archiving. There is other thing which we are validating, right? So at least it would be nice to archive the justifications if they are handy for someone, but we can potentially not verify it up until some point.
I agree it would be nice to have. I'm just concerned about how much effort that's going to take and how long that's going to take, and that's just going to block us getting like the next iteration of the release out for like several weeks, honestly. Maybe is there a way that we can like just make it so the update script gets the finality proofs, and then as soon as we get this released, we can start working on this full or maybe even start rebuilding the archives in the background while we, while we deploy the as is version right now. Like, are they necessarily mutually exclusive?
Yeah, that should work. Actually, I think we already have justification field in the like data structure. We just have it empty most of the time. So in terms of like decoding data, it should still be compatible. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, is that clear, Serge?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe a little bit more the bug that you're encountering or the blocker that you've got right now and kind of what your intuition is to what's happening?
Yeah, so when I submit put call, put extrinsic, usually first block fails to decode, and the error is out of range decoding compact of U32, and it fails to decode on justifications. So, but after that, after first block, it usually works for a couple of blocks, and then it stops working for a couple of more blocks. So it feels random, but yeah, I need to double check how I decode justifications. Maybe we slice like extra byte, or we should add an extra byte so it will decode properly. Yeah, but as I mentioned, I'm still confused because most of those blocks have same justification. So I don't know.
When you say same justification, are they exactly the same justification, Serge? Or is it similar?
Same, exactly same. Because we have justification, we fetch justification for blocks that don't have justification included by default, right? So blocks for the same epoch, right? So all blocks from particular epoch, they have same justification.
Okay, do you have a specific block
That
which
is
like
fine
works
because
and doesn't work?
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, I was asking, do you have example of block that works and block that doesn't work? So we can like compare and like try to send it into validation function and see why it complains or where it complains.
Yeah, I have.
Have you created an issue for that, Serge?
No, it's just part of my PR, my current scope.
Okay. So maybe if we just take this offline, if you just create a thread in the engineering notion and share and just ping Ved and Nazar on that, and then get their feedback so that this doesn't become a blocker.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. After that is resolved, what is your estimate on how much more effort is required before we'll be able to deploy this?
So after this issue resolved, I need to implement tests, but we can do it like in parallel, like as a separate PR. So for tests, I think like 1 or 2 days maximum.
Okay.
I mean, I include also like manual testing for like different edge cases. So we have like all scenarios covered.
Okay. And then after that, what is kind of the deployment going to look like for this? Like, what are the steps involved in that? I know this is going to be a tricky one.
I don't know. Let's discuss. I thought maybe we can deploy it on dev environment because we still have it as far as I know, and we're not using it. Do we?
Do we really? That's a waste of money if you have it. I thought we'd get rid of it.
Okay, I wasn't using it for a long time, so
yeah,
maybe it's not there already.
Is your concern that if we deploy it straight to the test net that it might break and then the relayer and everything, the front end will break as well?
Well, my concern is that we have test A and test B. Test B is public and test A hasn't fully synced yet. And I have a little update on that. I will tell you in a second. So once test A syncs, we can use one of like test B, for example. Yeah.
looks like we still do have dev environment. I have no idea what's on there, but we do have it.
Okay, but if we deploy it there, aren't we still going to have to sync like that, just like we are test A, before we can
On
before we can
dev?
push it? Yeah, or at least yeah, on dev.
No, we can just let it run for, I don't know, like for a few days. If there are no issues, then we can deploy it on test environment.
Okay, but doesn't it need to sync the history before we can let it run? Or maybe I'm confused.
We don't need to wait for full sync.
So you're planning to sync it, I guess. I'm really confused right now. Sorry. If we're not doing a full sync, what are we doing?
So we can specify, we can run, for example, we can run one relayer instead of two for Polkadot, for example, and we can specify particular block to sync from. And we don't have to add like all parachains. So
Oh, so you just want to deploy, like just do the relay chain of Polkadot, like starting at some block height, just to confirm that it actually works.
yeah.
Okay. So we're not talking about a deployment. We're talking about like a sanity check here.
Yeah, you can call it sanity check.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It just like, I would say like, let that run for like an hour, not a few days. And then if it works, like if it fires up, then we probably need to start working on the actual live deployment, whether that be on test A or some other, if we have to sync the whole network. I think that's a good process to get in the habit of having like a sandbox in the cloud that we can test this in versus having just to test it on our local machines. But just again, trying to get it out into the wild sooner, like in sort of the more production environment. I mean, that's kind of why we have test A and test B, right? We can like point test B to the relayer front end, and then if test A breaks and we deploy it there, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so you would like to deploy it to dev in this like kind of hacked mode, just to make sure that it works, and then after that, then assuming test A is fully synced, then we can deploy it as an upgrade to test A.
No, we keep test A as the main public one. So we switch from test B, and we can use test B to try to deploy this recent node and recent relayer with verification.
And with that deployment, like that would require deployment on the client, or sorry, on the substrate node side, as well as the upgrade to the relayer, like in kind
Yes, we'll just
it's the
wipe
same.
the server and install the new version of everything. It's like we are doing A/B switch.
Yeah.
Periodically.
Okay. But we're going to retain all the archives, or no?
We'll upload them again.
Okay, so we have to resync from Genesis again.
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't really matter if test. Okay, so you're just saying test A syncs so that we can use that as the one that's public facing, and then we just reboot test B from 0.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I guess I thought that maybe there was some way that we could try to deploy this as like a forkless runtime upgrade, so we could retain like the history that we have for test A, and then just as the new blocks come in, we could start validating them and not have to like resync everything again, because that just takes so long.
I'm not sure. I don't know if forkless runtime upgrade is possible, then we can just update relayer. But I don't know.
Do you think something like that is achievable then? Like the level of coordination that we can do for that?
It should be possible, Jeremiah. Like in the sense, like the runtime could be done forkless upgrades if we achieve that with the current state. The relayer can continue to push blocks, but the thing is, we changed minor details, especially the way that we store the blocks against the key. We used to do a SHA-256 of the key instead of actual block hash that's coming from the Polkadot, which we have changed recently. So initially, it used to be SHA-256 of the entire block, right? Now it's going to be the block hash that actually can point to actual Polkadot block. So that anyway will change with this new upgrade. So I'm not sure if we can fetch the previous old archived blocks directly with a block hash from Polkadot. Do that make sense?
So it's like a breaking change to the DApp.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. Yeah, because we used to create the key as a 32-byte hash based off the entire raw bytes that we get as part of the block, which is not correct in terms of it because the block hash changes, because the block hash is different. Now we fixed that and we actually store it as block hash versus this particular block. So
But where is the breaking change? Because there should be like an event that you've inserted something and that event should have a key. So it doesn't really matter for the app what that key is.
yes, if we can gather all those events, then we can fetch all those archive blocks, but we cannot fetch those archive blocks with the block hash that is part of, like if you want to get a block 0 or block 1, we can't use the block hash of that to get it from our DSN. It has to be reconstructed. The key has to be reconstructed by doing a SHA-256 of it, and then that key exists against that block. Now with the recent changes, we can just simply ask for a block hash, and then that gives you the entire block because we are saving it against that block hash rather than the actual hash of the key.
Okay, so do we have a problem?
For continue to pushing the blocks, we wouldn't have any problem. If you want to fetch the previous archived blocks, then we'd have to regenerate the key for it to actually fetch those blocks.
I mean from the object mappings.
Yeah.
So it does sound like we have to resync from Genesis in this case. It's not like upgradable. Okay. Just in the future, if we can think about a way, like the next time we deploy some changes to this, if we can think about a way that we could do, like utilize a forkless runtime upgrade, have like a storage migration to handle these kind of things, that would be preferred. I understand that there will be times when there's just no other option because we've changed the architecture and it's a hard fork. But just in the future, if we can just keep that in the back of our minds. Okay, so I guess we have no alternative but to resync. So onto the topic of resync, Serge, you said you have some ideas as to why it's so slow now?
Yeah, so I mentioned there was an issue with on test A specifically, and on Kusama relayer, not on Polkadot. And the issue was the connection with Subspace node was dropped due to some timeout. And I had suspicion that it was due to some update on Polkadot.js library. So today I created an image with lower version of Polkadot.js before that update was merged. And so far, it has no connection issues, at least with Subspace. And yeah, apparently I will let it run until tomorrow. And if that's still the case, I will create an issue for Polkadot.js. Maybe, I don't know, we'll move from there. Maybe I will create the PR to make it like this timeout, which is currently 30 seconds. Maybe we can make it configurable or find another workaround. So currently, it syncs, test A is syncing. The reason is why we have this issue on Kusama, not on Polkadot, is because we have more chains on Kusama, like 24 against 17 or something. Does it make sense?
So the connection is getting dropped, and then there's a timeout that's getting exceeded on reconnecting. And we think the connection is getting dropped just because we have too much load because there's too many parachains.
Yeah, we have too many like transactions submitted to Subspace node.
But not too many in a sense that it overflows the transaction pool, right? It should still fit in there because we
Yeah,
increased
it doesn't overflow the pool. It just I don't know. Yeah.
Just takes time to go through.
Right.
Okay, if this timeout is not configurable, we should have created a ticket in the Polkadot.js API repository and let developers know that this use case exists and we need to be able to configure it, because I feel like they are breaking some things from time to time, like these timeouts, and they had added the caching. Remember when the relayer was consuming too much memory?
Yeah.
And that is again not non-disableable. We like make the hack to work around that. So I think we just need to let them know.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay. So that means that the slow sync is blocked until we get that issue resolved.
No. Currently, it's running my image with an older version of Polkadot.js, so it works okay. It's syncing.
So as long as we downgrade Polkadot.js, it works.
Yeah, it's just like in the long term.
Yeah, we might upgrade Substrate and something changes that we need new version of Polkadot.js API, but we cannot use it. That would be a problem.
So for now we are good, but yeah.
Okay. And how long has the sync been running for test A? When did we start it?
Oh, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago, maybe.
And what like percentage is complete?
Let me check.
Yeah, it's exactly about 2 weeks on the Docker side.
Yeah, so on test B we have on test B we have 236 gigabytes and 48 million blocks archived, and on test A we have 193 gigabytes and 46 million blocks.
Okay, so it's about 75%
like
done after 2 weeks. So it's like another 3 to 4 days at the current rate.
It does show different numbers for me. It shows 201 gigabytes and 52 million blocks on the test A.
Okay, maybe I'm using. Can you share your link, please? That's interesting.
Sure.
Maybe my version of Relayer is different because I'm using the one on dev, but it still points to test
might be
A.
different. Maybe it doesn't have the latest update deployed with new parachains.
Yeah, I think
for all
your version is correct. You have more chains. Yeah, I need to update links. Okay, let's check. SP. Okay, so it's 44 gigabytes difference and like 2.5 million blocks difference.
Okay. And our block size right now, our max block size is 5 megabytes, 4.75 megabytes, something like that.
It's mostly Kusama that isn't uploaded fully. It's like half the way because a lot of small blocks were initially.
Okay. We had going back in time when we did this the first time, I remember that we had something where we set the block time to be faster, like 1 second or 100 milliseconds or something like that for like the first, I don't know how many thousand blocks it was, which was what we estimated we would need to upload. At what point does the normal like block time kick in right now? Like at what block height or time?
I need to check. I don't remember. It was something like 15,000 blocks or something, or 30,000.
Okay.
Let's see.
So that's going to cover roughly, like at full capacity, that should cover
15,000.
about 75 gigabytes. But we've got...
Yeah, we only had Kusama at that point, I believe, but we added a
Yeah.
bunch of parachains and Polkadot and another parachain, so...
Yeah. Okay, I have a crazy idea. What if we just make the block time like really fast? And then we have like a transaction that we submit on chain, or like do a forkless runtime upgrade or something that then extends back, or that pushes us back into normal block time, so that we can just let this run and monitor it like in fast mode. And then because it changes all the time, like we hard code it in and then it gets bigger and it's like not captured anymore, like it exceeds that length and then it starts getting slow again. So is there a way that we could just like make it fast by default, and then we sync the history like on the one node, like on the Genesis node, and then once it's synced, like we see that basically we've caught up to the head of the chain of all of the .sama, then we can deploy like a transaction or a runtime upgrade and then go back to like 6-second block time and like dynamic difficulty.
Yeah. So what we were doing there, we were just not updating solution range. So you're basically leaving the difficulty very low, but the history gets bigger. So the quality of solutions grows. So effectively we solve every single time, like every single time slot, which is 100 milliseconds in 1 second. So every second we have a block instead of every 6 seconds. So it's like 6 times faster. That was the hack that we had for 15,000 blocks.
Okay.
So we can have like a parameter, like a boolean that you can switch to like true or false once. That will by default allow this fast block production, but then you can like turn it off later.
Is there a way that we could change to get even below 1 second so that we had like 100 millisecond and then upgrade that time?
I think that might be problematic for a variety of reasons. And I don't think it's actually... Maybe you can change it with runtime upgrade, but I don't think you can change it with just like parameters change. It's kind of hard-coded as a constant. And it also impacts a whole bunch of things like solution range. It's computed from the time, from the block and slot time. Yeah, let's try to compute how many blocks we actually need to upload everything and whether 6x performance is acceptable. And if not, we'll probably figure something out.
Well, at 15,000 blocks, okay, so 5 megabytes per block, that's 75 gigabytes.
It's not 5, it's 3.75 the size allowed for transactions.
Okay.
And I believe we have 3.5 in relayer as a limit.
Okay. So that would be, how many gigabytes we have? 220, let's just say 250 gigabytes then, for now, for an upper limit. So that's 250,000 megabytes divided by 3.5 is 71,000 blocks. So that's at 1 second, that would be 71,000 seconds, which is 1,183 minutes, which is 19.72 hours. Best case scenario.
It's like in a day or two, we should be able to get it through. I think it's acceptable.
Well, that's theoretical maximum, right? and we
Right,
found that,
that's what I'm saying, like day or two, because it will not be one day probably, but it
yeah.
should be 2 days.
But if
And
we
that's
had
good,
it,
like,
well, at 250 gigabytes, but at a terabyte, which is what we expect we'll have, that's 4 days, 4 to 8 days.
oh, I don't think we will restart it that often at that point. Like it seems to be so defined.
I feel like we just keep kicking the can down the road on this. Like maybe if we could kind of fundamentally solve this.
Well,
Like if we
100
could,
milliseconds is not a fundamental solution either. Like fundamental
but
solution
it's,
would have the coupled execution and like scale the block size, but we are not there yet.
well, I mean, it could be a 10x improvement. We could go from 19 hours to 1.9 hours if we increase the block size by, or the block time by a factor of 10. And then that goes from like 8 days to 1 day if we're talking about like at 1 terabyte. Okay, something to think about. If we could make it work, like if we could have something where we have like, and if it takes a forkless runtime upgrade, I think that's okay because this is not expected. Like we're only going to do this like a handful of times. But if we could have something where we had like the trusted like Genesis mode where we have like one expected block producer with a fast block time with no work difficulty reset, and then we deploy an upgrade, and then we go back to the mode that we're in right now, and it changes the slot duration, and it activates the work difficulty or the solution range reset. Something like that would be ideal if that's achievable. That would give us like a significant boost in the sync time. We'd go from like weeks to days or even less than days. Okay, so Nazar, you and I and Sam can have a discussion about that offline. I think in the meantime, we just need to increase the block height from like 15,000 to 100,000, probably is a fair number for now. At which point we have this like 1 second block time, and that should give us already a significant boost over what we have right now.
That was an ugly hack. I think it would be even cleaner to just have a parameter that will be initialized, allowing this behavior, but then we can flip it back at a later point. Otherwise, we really like, right now we are building it with this special feature in order to enable that behavior, which is quite ugly from architecture point of view. So I think it would be more universal if we could just have a parameter, and then we can decide when we need to turn it off, instead of having a block hard-coded. Like if your layer crashes and misses those blocks, we can still have it if you have a parameter.
Okay.
But I'll send you a link where it is. Should be fairly easy to add.
Okay, Ved, you think you can take care of that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure about it, but I can sync with Nazar post this, and I can start working on that.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so we downgrade Polkadot.js. We make it configurable for the fast block time or faster block time, and then we resync after test asyncs. We point the website to test A or the front end of the relayer to test A, and then we resync test B from Genesis in this fast mode with the new version of the node and the new version of the relayer. And then that will take a few days. And then we should be able, if all goes well, then we should be able to point test B to public facing. Okay. Does that make sense to you, Sam? Okay.
Yes, it does.
Great. Okay, so that'll be the plan. And so Ved, if you can work on supporting that fast block time and the documentation that we talked about, and Serge, if we can unblock this issue that you're having on the decoding, post that, and then we can try to get this deployed on test on dev, like you said, just as a smoke test to make sure that this actually works. And then we can start the sync process and the rebuilding of everything and get that going. So it sounds like realistically, middle of next week, if everything works out, we might have this live. Maybe we can get it to sync over the weekend. Like by the end of the week, we could have everything sorted, sync over the weekend, and then early next week, middle of next week, we might be able to switch it over if we don't encounter any bugs or unexpected issues. Okay.
A question regarding the documentation, Jeremiah. Like, do we already start adding them to the version control of the mono repo itself, or do we add them in a different repo? Like, since we are beginning to add more and more, or like we want to version control more of these documentations.
I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, Nazar, I believe we want to have the feeds like validator idea, like that should be in the README of the palette in the mono repo. We will probably eventually have another repo, which is like a spec, which is going to be separate, which will be version controlled, but that's a longer term goal.
So I was thinking that the README would explain the high level idea, like conceptual description. And then when we have this trait, which is implementation of a particular feed processor, then we will have like a snippet that can be rendered in Rust docs that anyone can like follow when they want to actually implement it.
Like an example.
Yeah, even like example, this is like a trivial processor which is different from default one, but this is kind of how you can try to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, like this is a feed processor for like hash linking feeds, something like really simple like that.
Simple example.
Yeah, I think I'll default. I'll do a simple implementation that just takes in like how we used to do before, just a simple key value, so that people at least understand like what exactly the implementation would look like. But yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions on feeds validation or the archiving.sama right now? Okay. Skylar, if you want to give us an update on the parachain onboarding process, please.
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone, welcome to another week of parachain updates. We got a few new parachains this week. In Kusama, we have Pichu, which is totally new. First time in the last 3 auctions. So the last 2 auctions were Kilt and Moon River, just buying another slot. So those are existing parachains. Pichu is a new one. They won the 32nd auction, and they're supposed to be a data marketplace cross-chain application. What that data is, I'm not exactly sure, but Pichu is a new one. So they are in the pipeline along with Sora, Mangata, and Turing, which won the week before. Waiting to get those ones onboarded for Kusama. And then for Polkadot, we actually had Follow win, which is one of the premier names. Finally, they won. And then just recently, Unique won their auction. So that's for the 13th and 14th auctions. So those should be onboarded soon. We also got the RPC endpoint for Equilibrium after asking a few times. So just waiting for them to get onboarded to the front end, and then that process should be good to go. But yeah, just a few more parachains. The updates are a little bit shorter now that we're doing them every week. But yep, still making progress. Should have 1 or 2 new parachains coming on every week. The bonding amount is starting to get smaller still. Pichu won with, I believe, about $1.7 million worth of KSM. Kilt won with, I want to say like 2 or 3, but Kilt actually was fully self-funded. So they didn't have to do like a crowd loan or anything. They just put all of their money in there. And now once they transition to their new slot, which could be any time between now and August, when their first slot ends, all of the people who bonded for the crowd loan should get their tokens back, since it was self-funded. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the updates. Does anybody have any questions? Be happy to talk about it.
Did you
I
notify
have
them?
a
Sorry, go ahead, Serge.
Yeah, sorry. Just a quick note. Fala is already on the back end. Like I have added them today or yesterday. I just added them to the first column, so Skylar is aware. So once you are like you have contacted them, you can move right away to Leo.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, perfect. That makes sense. Thanks.
Cool. And are you tagging Leo or notifying him in Discord about these when they're ready to go, Skylar?
Usually I do it.
Yeah.
Oh, you do it. Okay, got it.
Skylar assigns to me, and once I'm done, I assign to Leo.
Makes sense.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, since he's not here today, if you could just follow up, just shoot him a short message, Serge, let him know that these are pending.
also, one more. So those new Kusama parachains, Sora, Mangata, and Turing. So Turing is already alive, and I will add them tomorrow. I just checked before the meeting. So
Okay. Great. Any other questions for me? All right.
Thanks, Skylar.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, Serge, do you want to give us an update on the Ethereum integration status, if there are any? I know you've been working hard on the .sama stuff.
yeah, no new updates since we last spoke. Yeah, I can just like reiterate. So I was working on the script. How can we save EVM blocks to archives? And I was exploring how can we store them as binaries, because we submit blocks as binaries to Subspace. And yeah, like there are a few options how we can do it. One, to get from LevelDB if we are running a local node. There is one node as a service provider, I think GetBlock. They provide this feature, but only for dedicated nodes. And yeah, I think there was another option. That had another option, but we haven't had a chance to discuss it yet. Yeah, that's the current state.
Okay, thanks, Serge. Any comments or questions on that? Okay. Anything else we need to discuss before we close out for today? No? Okay. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next week.